When you really break it down, most magic power systems are built on the same foundation. Magic is usually just energy, so more mana always equals stronger spells. And because of that, there's usually barely any rules, conditions, or actual strategy involved. That's why I can comfortably say Witch Hat Atelier has one of the most unique depictions of magic we've ever seen. And I know that's a bold claim, but once you see how this power system is actually structured, how every spell is built, and how precise everything has to be, you're definitely gonna agree with this take. So instead of just explaining it, let's really break down how exactly magic works in this series. Magic in Witch Hat Atelier is created through drawing. Yeah, like actual drawing. And I want you to really think about that for a second, because that alone separates it from almost every other magic system we see in anime. Because instead of using magic, you're actually creating it. You draw a pattern, and once that pattern is completed, the spell activates. That's it. That's the foundation for how magic works. It's very simple, but this knowledge is actually something that's carefully controlled. Now, at first, this might not seem super impressive. Like, okay, you draw something and it works. Nothing crazy. But once you go one layer deeper, this is where it starts to get a lot more technical. Looking at things at a surface level is exactly why Coco tried to copy a spell early on, and it didn't turn out the way she expected. She didn't know that every spell is made of 3 core parts: a central sigil, surrounding signs, and an outer ring that completes the structure. Every one of these parts does something differently. The sigil sets the type of magic you're working with, the signs control how that magic behaves, that being its movement, its shape, and its direction, and the outer ring is what actually completes the spell and allows it to activate. Once you understand that, you start to realize something. You're not just drawing a spell, you're building it. And that's what makes it so interesting, because every line actually matters. If the ring isn't fully connected, nothing happens. If one line is longer than the others, the whole thing becomes unstable. And if the angles are even slightly off, the spell starts behaving differently than you intended. So yeah, it is just a drawing, but it's a drawing where every single detail affects the results. Now that you understand how witches use magic, we need to talk about what's actually being drawn, because every spell starts with one thing: a sigil. The sigil is the core of the spell. It determines what type of magic you're even working with in the first place. So if you're trying to create fire, that starts with a fire sigil. In the story so far, there are 5 sigils: fire, wind, water, earth, and light. And at first glance, that might seem pretty standard, like, okay, elemental magic. But this is where Witch Hat Atelier starts to separate itself again, because the sigil doesn't actually define the spell, it only defines the foundation. What really determines how magic behaves are the signs, because the spell can have the same exact sigil, but depending on the signs that are drawn, they're gonna have 2 completely different effects. And once you understand that, you start to realize something. Magic isn't a fixed ability, it's actually something witches can experiment with. There's so many different signs you can use, like a float sign, a convergence sign, and a repetition sign. And this is where it gets even more technical, because how you draw the signs matter a lot. If a sign is drawn at an angle, it can completely change the movement of the spell. If one sign is longer than the others, it applies more force in that direction. And the arrangement matters too. Signs can be placed symmetrically for stability or asymmetrically for unstable effects, which means 2 spells with the same exact components can still behave completely differently depending on how they're arranged. It's this dynamic between sigils, signs, and the outer ring that really makes magic so fantastical in Witch Hat Atelier. Like the sigils and the signs, the outer ring also plays a huge role, because no matter how well you draw your signs, if the outer ring isn't complete, the spell won't activate. The ring is what seals everything together, and the moment it's fully connected, the spell is fixed, and the magic triggers instantly. I know this fact answers a question you've probably been thinking about. If witches have to draw everything, do they have to start from scratch every single time? And the answer is no. The outer ring allows spells to be prepared ahead of time. You can draw the sigil and the signs and leave the ring incomplete, and then finish it in the moment to activate the spell instantly. But it goes even further than that, because you can actually split spells across 2 different objects. So part of the spell can exist in one place and the rest somewhere else. But the moment those 2 pieces come together, the outer ring is completed and the spell activates. This is how Quifri flies with his shoes. Each shoe carries part of the spell, And when both feet come together, the outer ring is completed, allowing the magic to activate and lift the user into the air. The outer ring is the final layer of the power system. It allows you to prepare spells in advance, hide them, set traps, or activate them instantly the moment a condition is met. Bruh, when you really start thinking about it, magic in Wizard Atelier really feels like you're trying to solve a puzzle. Because once you understand how these three different things work together, you start to realize something. Witches aren't locked with a fixed set of abilities. They don't have preset moves. Because if you can control how something behaves just by changing how you draw it, then there really is no limit to what you can create. You can take an existing spell and tweak how it works, or create a spell that no one has ever made before. And that's what separates magic in Witcher from everything else. Because in other anime, you're either activating something or tapping into energy and releasing power. But here, you're not activating anything. You're creating magic from scratch. And that's a completely different way of thinking about power. Because now, it's not about how strong you are, it's about how well you can execute. That's why the power system feels so unique. Because instead of being limited by how much energy you have, you're instead limited by your precision, your understanding, and how accurately you can bring an idea to life. Basically, it's like button mashing versus actually knowing the combo. In Black Clover, you can kind of just spam magic, but in Witcher Atelier, if you mess up even one step, the whole thing fails. And that's what makes magic in this world feel so special. And as a viewer, you really feel that because when you see a spell, you're not just watching it happen, you're trying to figure it out. Like, how did they even do that? What signs were they using? And why is that spell moving like that? What did they change to make it work like this? And that's a big part of what makes this power system so cool and engaging. Every new spell you see makes you want to understand the magic even more. Now that you understand how spells work, we can shift focus to the tools that witches use to make their spells come to life. Arguably the most important tool is the conjuring ink. This isn't normal ink. It's made from a special substance called wood color, and it's the only thing that can actually activate the spell. Without it, everything a witch draws is just a regular drawing. The ink can also be modified too. You can mix in different materials to change how a spell behaves, like making it invisible, extending how long it lasts, preventing it from smudging, or even making it glow in the dark. Then you have tools that let witches use magic more efficiently. And when I mean efficiently, it almost always is in the context of being able to use magic more discreetly. There's the palm quire, a small notepad that fits in your hand, which is perfect for quickly drawing spells on the spot or finishing one mid-fight. You got your wands. There's the ink wand, which is essentially a dip pen used with conjuring ink. Then you got wands made from wood kuro itself. These are used to inscribe spells onto surfaces like wood or stone, but unlike ink, those markings aren't permanent. They can fade easily or be erased, which makes them more situational. There are other tools witches use, and those are called contraptions. And this is where you really start to see the purpose of magic in this world. Contractions are objects that have completed spells built directly into them, and because of that, anyone can use them. You don't have to be a witch. There are many different types of contraptions like glowstone pads, a pathway made of stone that only lights up when you step on them. When this happens, what's actually happening is that the spell isn't fully complete until pressure is applied. So when you step on the stone, the two parts connect, the ring is completed, and the light activates instantly. There's also things like a guidance orb. You place something related to what you're looking for inside it, and it points you directly towards that target. You also have things like a cooking pot that keeps food tasting exactly how it did when you first made it. I'm quite interested in that one though, because I don't know, does the food actually stay the same, or is it the taste? Because surely the food has to spoil like over a long period of time, but I don't know, to be honest. And lastly, you have things like pathways, which connects two windows together, allowing people to travel instantly. Once you see all of these contraptions, it really starts to click that magic isn't just something which is used in combats. It's embedded into everyday life, and that's what makes this system feel so intentional, because the purpose of magic in this world isn't just power, it's to improve people's life. It's meant to bring happiness. The version of magic we see in the world right now though, the one that's hidden and carefully controlled, it wasn't always like that. There was a time when magic was accessible to everyone. Anyone who understood the three components of a spell and had access to conjuring ink could make up spells. Magic wasn't restricted, it wasn't hidden, it was something people could use freely. But when you think about it, with the way magic works in this world, that kind of freedom was never gonna last, because when something this flexible is accessible to everyone, it doesn't stay peaceful for long. And that's exactly what happened. magic started being used for war. And because of how open-ended the system is, people weren't just using basic spells. They started pushing its experiments and creating more dangerous applications. And once that line got crossed, yeah, it's hard to ever go back. So eventually something had to change. A group of witches stepped in and made the decision to hide magic from the world entirely. They erased the knowledge of magic from the public, and from that point on, magic became something that's only passed down to people who could be trusted to use it properly. And that's how we got to this point in the story, where magic is a closely guarded secret. Because of this though, there were certain types of magic that were outlawed. And that brings us to forbidden magic, because even though magic in the present day is meant to be used to bring people happiness, not everything is allowed. I mean, if you think about it, if you heal a broken leg, won't that make someone happy? Yeah, it probably would, but that type of magic isn't allowed. Casting a spell that directly heals anybody is banned. It's a forbidden spell, and all forbidden spells have one thing in common: they directly affect human beings, which is why something like the spell that turned Coco's mom into a stone is considered forbidden. Transformation spells that can age or de-age someone, spells that can control someone's mind or emotions, spells that allow you to teleport without the use of proper tools, and even spells that can directly harm or alter the human body are all forbidden. There is one exception though: spells that wipe memories are allowed, but only for one reason though: to help keep magic hidden. And this is where everything ties together, because in this world, secrecy comes above everything else. That's why witches casting spells is actually so impressive, because the entire process has to be concealed. The pen, the paper, and even the act of drawing, all of it has to be hidden within the folds of their cloaks, so no one can see how magic is performed. You have to make sure the signs, the sigils, and the outer ring is invisible to any normal person that uses a contraption. For a power system that provides so much freedom and flexibility, it's quite interesting that witches are pretty heavily limited because of secrecy and bureaucracy, but at the same time, it also makes it quite novel and mystical. Magic in Witch Hat Atelier has the same feeling that magic in Harry Potter does. I know it's a power system, but it really feels more than that. The focus is less on having something guys can fight with, and instead crafting something that wows you and blows your expectations away. I know this was a pretty light explanation video, as I didn't go super into detail, but I did that on purpose. I wanted to just explain the general stuff a bit more so you understood how magic works in this world. After we get more episodes though, I am gonna drop a video that explains how magic works in extreme detail. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe so you could be notified when I drop the next video. That's all for me, boys. Love y'all. Peace.